Story 1. The Blizzard Visitor. It was mid-December and I was 17 at the time. Every year, just before Christmas, my mom had to leave for a 3-day business trip. Being an only child, I would spend those days alone, at home. Usually, her trips coincided with school days, so I'd be occupied for most of the day. But that year, her departure aligned with the start of my winter break. The house was entirely mine for 3 days. A snowstorm had engulfed the city, making it impossible to venture outside. After making myself some food, I settled in to watch a new movie. The storm outside was relentless. Gusts of wind howled, and the snowfall intensified. I had to pause the movie several times because the noise of the storm was so loud. Each time I looked out, it seemed the weather had worsened. My thoughts drifted to how surreal and isolating it felt to be alone in such an extreme blizzard, as though nature itself was closing me off from the world. As the hours passed, the howling winds grew more intense. Around 7 or 8 p.m., I heard the crunch of footsteps in the snow approaching the front door. The sound was unmistakable, accompanied by intermittent coughing. I froze, staring at the door, waiting for a knock or the doorbell. Minutes passed, and there was nothing. Curiosity overcame me. I peeked outside but saw no one. There were footsteps leading up to the porch and then back the way they came. Confused, I tried rationalizing it. Perhaps someone had mistaken my house for theirs and quietly left upon realizing their error. It wasn't a comforting thought, but I brushed it off and went back to the couch. The movie played, but my focus wasn't the same. I kept glancing at the door, feeling an uneasiness that wouldn't go away. Later that night, as the power flickered and eventually cut out, I sat scrolling on my phone, the storm continuing to rage outside. The eerie silence of the house combined with the howling wind made me feel like the only person left in the world. Suddenly, I heard a loud thump from the side of the house near the kitchen. I turned on my phone's flashlight and investigated. At first, I saw nothing unusual and assumed the noise was unrelated to the power outage. But as I turned to leave, my heart raced. A man's face stared at me through the back door, pale and shrouded by the snow-covered glass. "Hey, kid, let me in. It's freezing out here," he said, his hand gripping the doorknob. He coughed again, trying to open the door. Fear surged through me. "No," I muttered, stepping back. His demeanor shifted. His face twisted into a scowl, and his eyes seemed darker than before. "Open the door!" he bellowed, pounding the glass. Panicking, I retreated to the couch and dialed 911. The storm interfered with my phone signal, but after several attempts, I managed to get through. The man continued his tirade, but eventually disappeared into the blizzard. It took the police nearly half an hour to arrive due to the weather. They searched the area but found no trace of the man. That night, I couldn't shake the dread. Was he a desperate man seeking warmth or someone with darker intentions? The unanswered questions haunted me, and I began double-checking every lock in the house. I never saw him again, but the memory of his haunting face stayed with me, etched in my mind like a nightmare that refused to fade. Sometimes, I still wonder, was he just another victim of the storm? Or was he something far more sinister? Story 2. The Stalled Encounter. It was the end of November and I was returning home from a family visit. The 10-hour drive was supposed to be split into 2 days, but I decided to power through and complete it in one go. As the sun set, snow began to fall, light at first, but quickly growing heavier. By the time I was 3 hours from home, the snowstorm was in full swing, and the roads were nearly deserted. I was about 30 minutes from the nearest town when I noticed a car ahead of me. Its hazard lights flickered, and a man stood beside it. His car was angled across the road, partially blocking it. I had no choice but to stop. The man waved at me as I rolled down my window slightly. "My car's stuck. Can you help me push it out?" he asked, his voice thick with an unfamiliar accent. Reluctantly, I agreed. Throwing on my gloves, I stepped into the biting cold. The snow stung my face as I trudged to the back of his car. I waited for him to join me, but he lingered by the front seat, seemingly searching for something. "Are you talking to me?" I called out when I heard muffled voices. "No, just to myself," he replied, finally coming around. Something felt off. His demeanor had shifted, his smile fading into a cold, vacant expression. As I contemplated getting back into my car, several doors on his vehicle opened, and 3 more men emerged, rushing toward me. Adrenaline took over. I sprinted to my car, jumped in, and floored the gas pedal. The path around their car was narrow, but I managed to maneuver through without getting stuck. Heart pounding, I sped to the nearest town and reported the incident to the police. The officers took my statement, but explained that such incidents weren't uncommon in remote areas. I never found out who those men were or what they intended, but the encounter left me shaken and wary of roadside strangers. Even now, whenever I'm driving in bad weather, I feel a pang of anxiety whenever I see a stranded vehicle. Was it simply a random encounter, or was I just lucky to escape before something worse happened? Story 3. The Intruder. Last year, during the season's first snowfall, I came home late from work. By 10 p.m., I was upstairs in my bedroom browsing on my laptop. That's when I heard it, a loud thud from the ceiling. Initially, I dismissed it as snow shifting on the roof. But when the sound repeated, moving in a straight line, unease crept in. Grabbing my jacket, I stepped outside to inspect. To my shock, the snow on one side of the roof had slid off entirely, forming a pile by the house. The other side remained untouched, and none of the neighbors' roofs had similar disturbances. Chilled to the bone, I returned inside. As I stomped my boots clean, I froze. Water puddles snaked across the hallway leading upstairs. In one of the puddles was a boot print. My heart raced as I realized someone was inside. I bolted out the door and called the police. As I waited on the street, shivering, I saw a shadow pass by my bedroom window. Moments later, a figure appeared, staring down at me. They retreated before the police arrived, leaving no trace. Officers confirmed that someone had likely entered through an unlocked window after climbing one of the trees overhanging the house. Nothing was stolen, but their footprints suggested they had roamed the house, searching for something or someone. The thought still sends chills down my spine, knowing how close I was to a face-to-face encounter with the intruder. Even now, the memory lingers, an unsettling reminder of how vulnerable one can be in their own home. In the weeks that followed, I installed extra locks and cameras, but no amount of security could erase the lingering fear.